All right, let me give you the quick version first. I needed to ride about 100 miles in a day for an appointment, and then I'd come back the next day. I had planned to stay the night in a motel so I can recharge the bike overnight. It's been really windy the last few weeks. Previously, I had mounted a pannier rack to the bike, commonly thought of as a saddlebag rack, which is pretty strong. Also previously, I modified the pannier rack by attaching plywood so I could haul boxes easier. Because I already had the plywood attached to the pannier rack, adding the solar was a lot simpler. This would be much more difficult on a stock bike, although you could attach to the seat post and probably the rear wheel axle nuts. Overall, this did make the bike feel tail heavy, but was actually fairly easy to ride and it was stable in a crosswind. I didn't take any video of the actual ride. The day I did try to ride to El Paso, the headwind was just too strong, so I quit and went home again. Even though the solar was working, I eventually took it off because of the rough road I ride on. Later on, I just went without the solar, waited for a less windy day, and split the ride into 3 days instead of two. Rough numbers, if I was using approximately 200 watts riding, if I would have gotten 100 watts from the solar, that means I'm only pulling half of the power from the battery. So I could conceivably ride about twice as far on a battery because the solar would offset the power I was using. In reality, though, it's probably less than that because the sun was never directly overhead, and we get wind resistance from the solar panel. If you're able to ride where you're going and back on the battery you have, the solar isn't worth the trouble. It would be easier to add an extra battery if you needed more range. What I found on the 22 states ride back in 2022, adding solar worked very well on an extended trip because I didn't always have an option to plug in when I got stopped for the night. I would wild camp. And so by having the solar, it was continuously trickle charging the battery during the day. Even on a cloudy day, I got some usable solar from it. So it can work. It's worth the trouble. Just have realistic expectations.
Okay, 4th of April, absolutely gorgeous day. We have had massive windstorms and dust storms and just overall the apocalypse lately. Today feels like it's a nice day, gentle breeze. Hopefully not too much wind on the mic. And yeah, since that probably cut my whole head off on the last shot, hey, it's me again. This is the Giant bike, because it's made by Giant. This is the bike that I bought halfway through the 22 ride back in 2022. I bought this in California, and then I finished the ride on it because, well, the bike I started was completely worn out by the time I got there. This is a much better bike. This is an electric bike. It's got the big motor in the front. This is the battery pack. A lot of the electrics are kind of DIY. It's not finished like a real professional electric bike would be. But on the plus side, if I need to modify something, I can. So for instance, what I'm looking at doing today is adding a solar panel directly to the bike. When I did the 22 ride back in 2022, the 22 was supposed to be 22 states for the 22 veterans that commit suicide every day. So that was my goal. 2022, I was going to ride 22 states. I made 12 states. Took me about 6 months. So I wasn't going super fast, but we made it. Well, we made 12. That's better than nothing. Anyway, this is a Renogy 175 watt panel. It's about the size of the bike practically. most of the time I'm using about 200 watts on the bike when I'm riding. You know, a lot of people think you need a 750 watt motor. I am doing even up hills at 200 watts. If it's really level and not windy, I can run at 100 watts, okay? So I'm used to running a lot less power. So if this panel is 175 watts, I'm virtually using just the solar most days. I would be. Now this is still April, the sun isn't completely overhead yet. But this would, you know, if it gets me 100, 150 watts and I'm using 200 watts, that still means my battery will last about twice as long as it would otherwise. So it's worth the trouble. This doesn't weigh very much. 19 pounds. I don't think it weighs 19 pounds. That doesn't feel like 19. However, this is lighter than a battery. This is kind of the trick. The last time I went to El Paso, which is the goal here, I took all the batteries with me. And then I got to there, stayed in a motel, recharged the batteries, and then I came home again. So I can do that. But if I have any kind of a headwind, I'm going to be in trouble, which is very likely. So what I'm hoping to do is load the solar panel again and the batteries, and that'll help me stretch the battery range. Now, when I did the 22 ride, I had a solar trailer behind the bicycle, and the panel was mounted to the trailer. When I bought this bike in California, I was part of a solar bicycle group, I guess. We did a group ride, and one of the guys there just took a solar panel and just quickly made a bracket and mounted the panel right to the back of the bicycle. So this is what I'm going to try to do today. I need this to work by tomorrow. That's the tricky bit. So using some pieces of metal I've got laying around here, none of this is aluminum. What I'm thinking is, because I've got a fairly sturdy rack already, if I can do something like that and brace it back, and then also at the front, kind of brace it up, and then build a framework for the panel itself, because when the panel isn't in the box, it's really flexible. And if it's going to be windy, that flex is going to be a problem. If you've ever moved something like a piece of plywood or OSB, like building a house, in the wind, it'll get away from you. It's really tough to hang on to it. Okay, but if it's flat to the wind, since wind is usually level to the ground unless it's a tornado, the wind will just kind of go over it and not really affect you too much. The one thing though is if a truck goes by you, you get a lot of turbulence, that's rolling air, and that will catch it. So I need to make this strong enough not to get beat up too much in the wind. Also, I don't want to break the panel, because I don't know, this was a couple $100 or something. Also, the first 6 miles is my bumpy road. That's the other problem. And since most of the support is on the front, this thing is going to be flapping up and down. So I need to make it strong enough not to break. All right, we've been out here for a couple hours. From that angle, you don't even see anything. On the 22 ride, I used the same, not this exact one, but one like it. This is leftover siding from the house. It's, I think, 3/8 plywood. It's a 3-ply. It's plenty strong enough. I'm going to still brace it. A couple quick brackets just to hold it in place there. There we go. Yeah, you can see that. So just this bracket here. And since this is also plywood, it's just real easy to throw some self-tapping screws into real quick just to mock it up. You can see it bouncing around in the wind, but with the bracing, it should be okay. It'll keep the flex panel from bouncing so much. Okay. Also, I made a change. I'm going to use my old 100-watt panel instead of the 175. Just kind of like, my biggest thing is I don't want to break the 175 for a one-time trip. I already know the 100 works. I've got two 100s. One of them is damaged. It only puts out about half power, but the other ones still seem to put out full power. All right, here we go. That's actually pretty good. Yeah, that doesn't feel bad at all. Cool. If I leave this uncut, it's 27 inches wide. All right. These handlebars are pretty wide. They're 31 inches. Okay. So if I don't hit something with the handlebars, this will probably miss it too, unless I'm right next to somebody's car. But what I'm looking at, if I decide, you know, like if it's really windy, or let's say the sun is like setting and I need to stop for a break anyway, I think I can do this. And this is something that was a real problem on the one-wheel trailer. The weight was just all over the place. You know, the trailer was way back there. I had a lot of weight back there. The bike itself wasn't super heavy, but it was just a mess. I ended up breaking the hitch, which came off of the seat post back, and that was the end of that trailer. So, which was sad because I spent all the time making it. Anyway, so what I can do, if I just hang on to the panel, put my foot on the wheel so it doesn't slide out, and then lay the whole bike down, that's, you know, that way it won't tip over. It's nice and it's stable, right? School bus bumper. Never got around to putting it back on. If I'm not careful, this is going to end up turning out good, which is going to be annoying if I only use it once, but maybe I'll use it more. Could happen. That is not a 1/4 inch bit, but it'll be fine. Oh, that's much better. That's actually not bad. Not too bad. I started drawing a center line, and I'm going to be riding this in a crosswind tomorrow. It's not going to make a lot of difference, I don't think. I'm just hoping it's pretty flat so the wind doesn't flip it. Yeah, because that'll suck. Okay. There we go. Well, the good thing is I don't even feel it back there. I mean, I'm hitting all the bumps anyway. Everything bounces a little bit, so it doesn't have a lot of weight on it, so it should be fine. Oh, where did I put the camera so I don't run over it? See if I can hit the clothesline here. Hey, look at that. Now, when I left on the 22 trip, I was dragging a heavy trailer, and I only had 100 watts of panel, and I still made it, most of the way to California. And then I found another panel on the side of the road, of all things, still with the heavy trailer. But I've got so much batteries now compared to on the 22 trip. This might not actually be too bad. I guess I can put the panel on then. And yeah, if you saw the intro, this is not the panel I was thinking I was going to use. This one's a Sun Power. This is one of the ones that I took all the way. And let's see. Drills. Time to put some new smears on here. I got it hooked up to a battery and it is working. Shows I'm getting about 5 amps out of the panel at, I think it said 15 volts. Let me look it up here in a minute. When you get it clean, you see all the little tiny scratches and dings. These panels got put through a lot. Constantly getting the bike knocked over and everything. More or less aimed at the sun. Clean. 1.7 amps going to the battery at 53 volts. It's about 107 or about 70 watts, I think, somewhere around there. I'll figure out the math later, but that's not completely terrible for a used panel and not optimum conditions. I mean, it's about as sunny as it's ever going to get, but I'm never going to be actually aimed at the sun when I'm riding. That's the important thing to remember. So like if the bike is level, how much did that change? Yeah, 1.5 amps and yeah, 1.7 there. Okay, so it's never going to be perfect, but something. Then the solar will keep trickle charging them as we go. Okay, so this looks more like a normal bicycle battery. This is one here and one here. They're duct taped together and then they're wired through a Y adapter here. Like a three-way connector, I guess. So I can go from solar to battery, and then this one goes to the motor. So that's what I got to do next. And then we'll be functioning. Well, I guess that's about it. Now we get to pick up all the pieces and put them all away. Kind of a little bit out of the wind, although now it feels like the wind is still blowing over here. I just did some ratchet straps to hold the batteries in place. And I got some clamps here. I don't know, these are kind of like a pipe clamp for mounting a pipe or for hanging wire bundles. That's to hold the tire pump in place. Yeah, the bike is pretty tail heavy. The way that this works out, if you've never done this before, like intuitively, if you were going to put a load on a bike, you'd think you could put it between the axle and the bottom bracket where your pedal is. But your foot, and I got small feet, your foot reaches from the pedal backwards. So you end up pretty much hitting where the axle would be. So anything forward of the axle, you'll kick. So you got to push it all behind the axle. So I'm noticing it's like, okay, those are heavy batteries. The ones on the other side are heavy. Plus I got a 4-foot tail sticking out. I was calling it a 5-foot tail, but this panel is shorter. You know, from here back doesn't weigh hardly anything, but the plywood itself, you know, and all of the weight of this whole thing is basically behind the axle, you know. Now the good thing is I got me forward of the axle, so that seems okay, but when I'm just moving the bike around, I really feel it. The front, it almost comes off the ground right now. So more ideal if I could move the batteries into the triangle here, you know, in this part, or the diamond, or whatever you call it, you know, where the water bottles are. I was looking also, I could hang a battery underneath the main tube. That's where like if you buy an e-bike, that's usually where the battery goes, is on the main tube. The other option is to move some of the weight up to the forks, which would make sense. It doesn't help, you know, with the suspension, but You could move a lot of weight forward. I don't have any kind of brackets that I can find that really would make it easy to mount something up here. But when I'm riding, I tend to lean forward anyway, because I mean, if you're sitting on the bike, you know, you're pedaling from here, your seat's here, your handlebars are way up here, so your main body is way up here somewhere. So that more than offsets this back here. It's just kind of weird, awkward feeling. So, yeah. It actually, having the cargo rack already on the bike, that made all the difference in the world, because then I had something hard to connect things to. Mounting the batteries, and since what I added on the cargo system is plywood, I could just run self-tapping screws right into the plywood to mount things. So that made it really fast. The little charge controller. This guy, if you're ever looking for something like this came from Grin Cycles up in Canada, grin.ca, I think. It's made pretty much for this. It's an up-converting charge controller. Usually, you know, for instance, your panels would be 20 or 30 or 50 volts going into a 12-volt battery. In this case, I've got a single panel putting out maybe 20 volts on a good day, going into a 53-volt battery. So this is just a step-up converter, but you can go in here and, like for instance, it's already up to 53.5 volts on that battery. So now it's tapering off. It's, you know, it's going to maintain 53.5. So, you know, I'm going to unconnect that or disconnect it and then plug in the next battery and get it charged. And then I'm going to hurry up and make myself an adapter so that I can plug the last battery in and get it topped off tonight, so that when I hit the road tomorrow, it'll be as full as it can be. Yeah, all right, there we go. I didn't bother recording the process, but I wanted to show. Now, granted, some of this is tools, but that box is a battery pack, and that black thing is a battery pack, and that's the solar charge controller. And there's gobs of wires in here, and zip ties, and cargo straps, and scary looking electrical wiring. I just took all of this off of the Giant bike, and oh man, is it nice now. It doesn't weigh anything. I don't think I've ever really gotten to ride that bike in its normal configuration of it's always had solar or crap all over it. It's kind of nice. Anyway, just wanted to get a shot of that.